Hello, welcome to Making Photos. I'm Ian Butterfield. In this video, I'm going to show you how I edited 4 of the images from my geocaching walk. Now, the geocaching walk I'm talking about is the one referred to in my previous video. If you haven't seen it, the link's up there. Go and have a look at that before watching this one, and it will give you the context of where these photos were created. So I created quite a few photos on that walk. It was a 4-mile walk, as you'll know, and some of the images were better than others. I'm not going to take you through the processing of all of them, but I have selected 4 which generally sum up all the techniques that I used whilst creating the full set of images. So the images I've selected are the ones that you can see on the screen at the moment. I've got the style image from early on in the shoot, and I really wanted to just show about the colour effects on there, how I brought out the autumnal colours in there, even though it was January. The next one was the trees on the field. It's not a particularly inspiring photo, but I've chosen that because I wanted to show how I created the sky on there. There's a bit of a twist to that. It's not white clouds on a blue sky as it appears. The next 2 are black and white, and the processing on them is very similar, but just slightly different. So I thought it was worth going through both of those. So that's the end product, but where did we start and how did we get there? So let me change the photos to how they came in from camera. And that's how they were in camera. Bit of a difference, isn't it? Now, I just want to say, before I start on this, about the importance of editing. A lot of people look down on manipulated images, as it's often referred to. Manipulating your images is something that's been part of photography from the very beginning, really. Your first bit of manipulation is what you choose to capture. You exclude things, you cut things out. The next bit that's always been done is how you affect the colours on there. In the film days, it was done with filters, it was done with a choice of film stock and things like that. Now in the digital world, we tend to do all of those things in post-production. So I'm going to show you what I did with this image. Our first image is the style, which I made, the photo I made whilst I was on my way to the second geocache. Now, of all the images, this one required the least amount of editing to it, but it still required some. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is to straighten it up. Those posts aren't quite straight, so they just need a slight tilt to it. So R for the crop rotate tool, and I'm just going to use the grid on there just to get everything nice and straight, and I think that's about all it needs. Now, my original thoughts with this image was I wanted it to be a warm image right from the word go. So let's get this warmed up by the use of changing the white balance. So I'm just going to pull the white balance up until it's starting to look a little bit more summer, autumnal, probably about 8,000 thereabouts. Yeah, that will do on there. That's started to give that sort of warmth to it. We're going to do a little bit more to it as we go on. I'm happy with the tint on there, don't need to adjust that. Next thing I want to do is something I do on all my photos, and that's add a little bit of clarity. My default is about 20, so let's bring that up. And a bit of vibrance, this will also help bring out those colours. So bring the vibrance up to about 20, I should think, on here. Yeah, round about there. It's starting to get the effect that we want, but I think it just needs a little bit more help. And to do that, I'm going to use the color grading option. And I just want to add a bit of warmth into the shadows on here. So if you're not familiar with the color grading, it allows us to effectively change the colour of the midtones, the shadows and the highlights. I'm just going to change the shadows, and I'm just going to warm it up a little bit to just bring it out something along here, a little bit more, until I've got something I'm happy with. I don't want to go too far with it. But yeah, something along there, those sort of lines. That's giving me the sort of effect I'm looking for. And then finally, for this image, I'm going to just add a vignette to it. So on the effects tab, we're just going to add a dark vignette, about 50 odd, about 55. So I'm just going to take the feather down a little bit on here, about 40, yeah, something like that. And there, I think that's I'm happy with that as an image. I like the fact that I've managed to get the style over on the 1/3 line. I've got a little bit of framing from the hedge around this side, and we've brought out those sort of golden colours, and the vignette helps to drive the eye towards the style. The second image is this field of trees. There weren't many options for a photograph at this particular geocache, and as you can see, the sky is just horrible and dull. But we're going to make that into a nice summer's day sky. First thing I can see is I have got a dust spot on here, so Q, and just get rid of that. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see what I can pull back from the highlights on here. So if I just pull the highlights down, if I go all the way down, you can see, I can start to see there is some detail in there, which is what I want. So I'm just going to give this a little bit of going down, about 60 odd, I should think, about there. And I want to be able to see the detail in the trees, so I'm just going to bring the shadows up, about 30 odd, something like that. And that allows that detail to be visible within the trees. And the clarity as well, again, my standard 20. And I'm just going to bring some vibrance into this as well. Again, it tends to be low 20s, what I go for. And I'll add some saturation. I just want that ground to start looking as though it's a sort of summery day on there. The ground's looking fine, the trees are looking fine. That sky still doesn't really do much for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of the masking tools that's available now within Lightroom to just select the sky and apply changes to that. So the masking tools are up here. So I click masking and I say select sky. And we just let Lightroom do its thing. And one moment later, it's got the sky on there. Now, with that, I can now start playing around with the settings on here. And I want the sky to have a little bit of a blue tint to it anyway, not as much as it was. So about 30 minus 29, something like that will do nicely. The main tool I'm going to use is the dehaze slider. The dehaze slider is really good at bringing back details in the sky, and this is only going to affect the sky because we've got this mask applied. So with the dehaze slider, I'm going to go up to a while and just see how far I can go with this, and I think into the low 50s. Now that's starting to look like this nice summer sky, but because everything else doesn't really match that sky, I need to tone it back. With the saturation, I'm just going to bring that down until I get a sky which looks a little bit more realistic. So I think something like in the 40s, 42, yep, that will do nicely. And I just want to try and get a bit more of a bite to it. So if I bring the blacks down, the darker areas will get just that little bit darker. And if I bring the highlights down, make sure we're not clipping anything, it just brings it in a little bit better. So bring the highlights down just a fraction. And that's starting to match the sort of mood of the rest of the image. And if I add a bit of clarity, it will just add contrast in those midtones. So you can see how that just adds a bit of bite to it. So that extra clarity in there. Don't want to go too far, about 20. But that's just applying extra clarity to the sky, not to the rest of the image. And that, I think, is about all that's needed to make that image work and look much more like a summery day. And that sky, I think you'd be hard pushed to look at that and think, oh, that wasn't a blue sky there, that it was a white sky, and that it's been created in post-production. I find that sort of technique is often more pleasing than a true sky replacement that you can do in Photoshop. Right, let's move on to the next image. This image is the tree that I photographed. And again, I could do the sky sort of thing with this, but let's use a slightly different way of approaching this one. Now, first of all, let's think about the crop on this. So R for the crop. Now, I think I need to sort of turn it very slightly, and I think a square crop would benefit from that. So if I try and line that up to something like that, so the tree is in the middle. So happy with that as my crop. Having cropped the image, I think this is going to work much better as a black and white image. So I'm a big fan of the Adobe Black and White 3, so I'm just going to select that. I think if I take the exposure down very slightly with it, just to try and get everything in there, I think it just needs that. But now the tree itself's looking quite dark, so I'm just going to bring those shadows up so you can start to see the detail in there. A lot of black and white images benefit from having a little bit extra contrast. I don't think this needs much, but if I just give a little bit of contrast in there and just bring those highlights down, see what detail we can find in the sky. I'm not getting much in there, but that doesn't matter. We've got other tools available to us. We'll try adding a little bit of clarity, my standard 20, which generally helps most of my images. That's getting there now. And let's try the dehaze and see if that helps bring out anything in the sky. We're just bringing it up. Yeah, we're just starting to see a little bit come in on there. I don't want to go too far with it because we're darkening the tree too much if we do. So I think about there. I do think we need something around the edges on it. So I think this is where a vignette, so under effects, if we bring the vignette down into the 30s, and then again feather it off up into the 70s, and that should give us an interesting sort of shot like that. I'm just thinking maybe I need a touch more exposure on there. That. And yeah, I'm happy with that. And that's made a much more interesting image of the tree. So let's move on to our final image in this set. Now this one was one of the last images I created, and what I need to do with this is I need to make it interesting. It's a boring shot, but I think this can be quite an interesting shot. The first thing that comes to mind with it is it's not straight. So I'm going to go to transform, and I'm going to go with guided, and I'm just going to try and find two things which are or should be straight. That's one, and the other is down here. So that's straightened it all up. Put the tools back on there. Now, as previously, I'm going to go with black and white 3 on there as my starting point with this. It's looking a little bit dark. I've got a space at the top end here, so I can bring the exposure up just a bit, 0.7, that sort of thing, 2/3 of a stop-ish is what I want. There we go. That's working nicely now. Now, black and whites usually benefit from a little bit of contrast. This one will be no different. So as I bring the contrast up, that's kind of making it work better. I'm just going to add my standard clarity in there, about 20 on it, what it needs. And finally, I think this will, like most of the others on this particular shoot, will benefit from having a vignette. Let's make it quite a subtle one with it compared to the others, about -25, and then just feather it right off. So go really high with the feathering on there. So you can hardly see there's a vignette on that, but if I just toggle it on and off, you'll see what difference it makes without and with, and it just really makes the whole thing sort of pop and draws you into it. And from quite a boring image, I think that one works really nicely. Let's have a look at all 4 of them. Those are the edits. I hope you found this helpful. The idea that over the 2 videos, you've seen me work out what shots to take and how I've edited them to come up with the final image. So it's the whole process you've seen over the course of the 2 videos. So thanks for watching. I hope you found it helpful. I've got some more videos which I'm sure you will find helpful, and they are on the screen in the playlist, and one in particular is up here. Go and have a look at that one now. So until next time, thanks for watching and keep making great photos. Bye for now.